So good afternoon now, everyone. We're running a little bit behind schedule, so our session is going to be just a little bit tighter in time frame. My name is Andrew Hetherington, as I was introduced. I'm Chief Executive of an organisation called Business to Arts, which is an organisation that consists of about 300 different members from both the cultural and corporate communities in Ireland that are interested in this entire discussion about the importance of the creative industries and our arts and cultural sector and how it has always been a leading light of Ireland. And this morning we had a great discussion about the European Capital of Culture bid. And if you don't know about that, you should be keeping an eye on Galway, on Limerick, on the southeast cities of Kilkenny, Waterford and Wexford, and on Dublin, and their bids for the European Capital of Culture in 2020. But I am delighted to have such a phenomenal panel with me today from the tech, from the film and music industries, here to talk about our discussion, which is what cultural institutions and business can teach each other about leading innovative teams. Many people might think that that's a challenge, and I know from our organisation that once you bring two communities together, you can be really inspired by what can happen. But to start with, on my very far left, I have Ruth Vitale, who is a film producer and an executive director of CreativeFuture. Sitting beside her is Sharon McCooey, Senior Director of International Operations at LinkedIn. In the middle, we have Trish Long, Vice President and General Manager of Walt Disney Company in Ireland. And immediately beside me, we have Philip King, Director of South Wind Blows. So I'm going to start the discussion with Ruth. Ruth, how do you feel about the crossover between cultural institutions and businesses, and what do you think they can teach each other in terms of innovative leadership?
Well, you know, I come from Hollywood, and Hollywood is a very strange place to people that aren't, from there. I'm not actually even from there. I'm from Boston originally, but I've been in Hollywood for the last 28 years. And I think what the cultural industries can teach business is that there is no one way to get someplace, right? That it's very different. You hire creative teams, and they may get there in a very different way than anything that you would expect. I had a long discussion with Alec Berg, who is one of the executive producers on Silicon Valley, the show that he does for HBO. And we had a little bit of an argument about whether or not, when you hire a creative team, as an executive, you should give them notes as the business person, because the executives are always looked at as suits, right, Trish?
Indeed.
Yeah. And, I said to him, well, I think executives have a very good role, right? And, they're the business side, they understand the business parameters. And his example to me was, if you're having surgery, you wouldn't wake up in the middle of surgery and give your surgeon directions, would you? I thought, oh, wow, that's very drastic. But in a way, he was right. I believe that what's so valuable is to hire creatives that you believe in their vision, and allow them to realize it, right? And then our job is to get it out there.
And when you think about the incorporated creatives in the film industry, so one of the things that I'm always struck about at the budgets in the film industry and in the entire creative industry are a fraction of what budgets in other industries may be, and yet there's incredible things achieved.
Well, that depends. In my world, in the independent world, you can make a movie for $1 million, and as Trish knows, in the studio world, they can be $250 million to make and another $100 million to market. But you're quite right. You look at a little movie like Beasts of the Southern Wild that ended up being one of the Academy Award nominated Oscars of 2 years ago, and that movie was made for, I think, $1 million. Kids slept on couches, made that film. It was extraordinary, and it went on to, to be nominated. So yes, you can make things for small amounts of money. The problem is when you get into big storytelling, whether it's the Avengers or animation, they're years of work, thousands of people, thousands of hours of labor. So, but yes, there are the small indie voices who we don't want to lose, because then they go on to do Captain America, like the Russo brothers, right?
And a great example of that is actually Song of the Sea and the Cartoon Saloon here in Ireland.
Right.
Who were also Oscar nominated.
Right, yeah.
And Sharon, in your case, you have a large and growing company in LinkedIn, which has got users at its heart, and audiences in the cultural sector are at the heart of all of the creative industries and cultural industries. How do you feel there's a link between leadership between a tech company and, say, the creative sector?
So I think I'll follow on and talk about maybe dreaming big. So LinkedIn has a mission of connecting the world's professionals to make them more productive and successful. So that's sort of where we start with absolutely everything. And the member, in this case, the free member, and 300 million plus free members on LinkedIn today, they're our bedrock. So they're the people we think about all day, every day, and we want to try and make them more productive and successful. So that two things have happened in regard to that. The first thing is when you have such a big purpose, your talent generally acts differently. Right. So we give them, and I have that mission and vision. The vision is to create economic opportunity at scale. And we're talking about things like a digital representation of the economic graph. And when you talk about things in that light and that size, the talent, the employees of LinkedIn act differently. So we think bigger. We're more empowered. There's less policy. There's less direction in that regard, other than those ultimate big goals. So I think that's that dream big piece. And what we see happen then with the free members is where we see sort of creativity coming in place. When you provide a free platform, I think what we in LinkedIn originally thought the free platform would be used for was exclusively in the job sense, in the get a job. But now it's very much about get your dream job. So we see people, entrepreneurs using it to get venture capital. We see charities in the CSR sector seeing it to engage volunteers. We see 15 and 16-year-olds looking at the profiles of others, the people in this room, and they're thinking, I want my dream job. And then they start thinking, how am I going to get my dream job? So they look at your profile, any of our profiles, and they say, whoa, that was the path they took. So they use that to inform skills decisions, education decisions on what to do when you're on your J1 over the summer. It's a very, very different. So it's used creatively. So with that big, that big vision, the members have reacted differently. The talent reacts differently. So we just see that will bring. We can now see that we could have that. Move the GDP of countries. It's just a fantastic opportunity.
And when you think, leadership in its biggest context, so nurturing leadership within a company like LinkedIn involves lots of different facets. You've got multiple teams. What are the great things that you're doing to encourage leadership that people from other organizations could learn from?
So I think we can all learn from each other. So that's definitely. LinkedIn doesn't have all of the answers in any shape, make, or form. A couple of, I suppose we talk about the innovation hub that we have in Dublin. We have 700 people. We're just about to have our 5th birthday in Ireland. The global LinkedIn family look to the LinkedIn family in Dublin to talk about, to look at innovation and ideas. So some of the ideas is we have an in day where once a month we take that day to spend time on what we love, what we dream about. A lot of those initiatives end out in community-based initiatives, in CSR initiatives. We have a couple of patents pending on work we've done right now for free apps that we plan to give to the volunteer sector in Ireland to help with engagement. We have that our in day. We have a LinkedIn for Good organisation, which is LinkedIn's internal CSR, and that has actually developed product for LinkedIn, which we recently launched called the Volunteer Marketplace. Talent at LinkedIn, working on hack days, just to enhance the platform, but also enhance what we can do for the community. So I see that as true leadership that results in having a big dream.
There's a similar story with Disney as well, isn't there, in terms of probably the most creative organization that you could think of in the world. When you think about Disney and your experience with it, Sharon, what do you think it takes for creative leaders to thrive in an organization like Disney?
Well, I definitely think that creativity can thrive within any organisation or business, but it takes the right leaders and, most importantly, the right attitude towards change to help create the culture that will enable it to take root. And that idea is at the heart of a fantastic book, which is written by somebody that I'm lucky enough to work with, called Dr. Ed Catmull. And Ed is Pixar's co-founder, I know you know him, Ruth, with the wonderful John Lasseter. And he's also current president of both Pixar and Walt Disney Animation Studios. If you haven't read the book, you really should. It also was a recent choice of Mark Zuckerberg's Year of Book Club. With Ed's experience, while it is in running, artistic powerhouses, there are lessons for all businesses in Creativity Inc. And just 4 thoughts I plucked out of it, which I can try and share with you. The first one is my favorite, which is let your ideas suck. And what he means by that is that, Disney and Pixar, we have compelling stories and they're beautifully put together, but they don't start out like that. And the process that these beloved movies go through often start with a story that bears absolutely no resemblance to the final product. A quote from Ed on this is, "All that anyone sees is the final product, and there's almost a romantic illusion about how you got there. But when we first put up something, these stories suck." And he gave an example, which is that the first version of the movie Up, which I'm sure many of you will know, included a king in the castle in the clouds. They threw out everything from that first idea, except for 2 things, a bird and the word up. The second thought he has is that true creative processes aren't quick and aren't easy. People would like things to be done quickly, which is the result of what he calls, I love this term, feeding the beast. Ruth, you know this one. Oh, yeah. In this case, the beast that he means is the majority of people who are making the film, or indeed who are building any product. They're concerned with generating the revenue and making sure that things get completed. And while these goals are important, as creative leaders, we must recognize that initially things will be a mess and they must protect the process. He says there's nothing that is easy about this, but one thing, which is the temptation to try to make it easy. And I think we all know that one. Third thought was communication cannot and should not follow organizational structure. And that while many companies work really well within a hierarchy, communication shouldn't follow the same rules. Now this can be a tough one for us to get our heads around, but he believes that communication needs to be able to be between anybody at any time, which means that it needs to happen out of structure and out of order. And as we know, as managers, we don't always like to give up control. And it's often taken as a sign of weakness or disrespect if you go into a meeting and you learn something for the first time. But such open lines of communication are necessary if you want to create a creative environment where good ideas can be freely shared without going through the proper channels. And finally, his thought is, pay attention to the group dynamics. Pixar and Disney are very famous for our creative brain trusts, groups that work together to solve problems and perfect ideas. But an effective brain trust is more than just a group of smart people or even a group of people who get along. There's great value in creating a space where it's safe for people to say something stupid without being chastised. So the problem isn't in finding ideas, it's in finding a team that works well together and in creating a culture in which they can. And while some of these sound deceptively simple, I'd remind us that they've proven somewhat successful for Ed, who, as well as having created a company which has produced 14 consecutive #1 box office hits, 30 Academy Awards, and has grossed more than $8.7 billion at the worldwide box office to date, and, on the side, has helped to reinvigorate a new golden age of Disney animation. Far more importantly, I think he's worth listening to, and his book is worth reading, about creativity in business, because he helped create the culture which took us to infinity and beyond.
Excellent. What a story there. And there's a book that everyone should have on their reading list if you haven't got it
and
already.
I'm not getting any royalties, I promise.
Philip, you've had an incredible couple of years as well, and tell me about what you've learned from your experience in the music industry and how that relates to developing innovative leaders in contemporary Ireland.
Well, where do you want to start, really? This morning I was in West Kerry, where I live, and before I headed east to come up here this morning, I walked up to the top of that hill that goes between Ventry and Dunquin, and I looked out west. And I looked out west towards America. Needless to say, my eyes weren't strong enough to see it, but I sensed that it was there. And I went there specifically this morning because I was coming here, because I was coming to this gathering, this imaginative gathering put together by the ambassador. And really, the thought that came to my head was, 25 years ago, I made a series for BBC television called Bringing It All Back Home. And it was the story of the migration of our music to America, what happened to it when it went to America as an orally transmitted music, how it collided with technology, how it became an intellectual property, how it left an indelible thumbprint on the making of the American creative cultural industry, an industry which, as we have seen from an earlier speaker this morning, is worth so much money. And not alone is that industry worth so much money, it is the industry with which America colonized the world. Of that, there is no doubt. When I was 7, I got my first gun and holster and cowboy hat. You know, when I was 12, had I seen a James Dean film, did I buy a denim jacket? I probably did. When did I start drinking Coca-Cola, consuming rock and roll? Not long after that. So where the culture goes, the commerce follows. I see that Joseph O'Connor, the writer, is here, and I know he's going to be speaking a little earlier on. And oddly, I had written down something that he said some years ago when he was talking about creativity and the creative gene that we have in this country. And he said, some of the greatest things that Irish people have done and always will do are in the dream field that is the human imagination. Our stories and songs define us. Our images reflect us. Our music explores the geography of our desires and the hidden yearnings of our hearts. Yes, I mean, we're a collaborative people, you know, we're a mobile people, we're an agile people, but I think that we need to be a little bit more integrated because we're a dispersed people. President Michael D. Higgins last year did me the great honour of inviting me to work with him to curate an event at the Royal Albert Hall to coincide with his visit to the Queen. We walked into the Royal Albert Hall. There were 5,500 people in the room. They were a dispersed intergenerational diaspora of people. One of the things I realised in the room, I met an official from the Department of Foreign Affairs, and I said, you know, how many Irish people are in England? And he said there are 10 million citizens in Britain entitled to an Irish passport. I was floored. I was floored by the actual number. We put on a concert, and what happened at that concert had not so much to do with what happened on the stage, but how the audience were drawn in and became part, the central part of what happened on that night. An emotional bonding agent was released into the atmosphere, and that emotional bonding agent brought together a dispersed diaspora for a moment in time. And I took an amazing lesson from that. When I came back out and I looked at my work, Bringing It All Back Home, and we're thinking about putting a big Bringing It All Back Home operation together inspired by conversations like this next year in 2016. So we can gather together all of those people who have dispersed around the world and bring them together with a sense of recognition and a sense of Irishness. And there's another note I just want to read to you here. I just said this. I said, there is a particular opportunity to reposition and promote Ireland's cultural and historical contribution globally just now. And that's why this initiative by Ambassador O'Malley is so vitally important. Irish artists embody the values which the rest of indigenous exporting services and product industries must emulate. And what are those things? Authenticity, excellence, creativity, inclusiveness, differentiation, a unique contribution that is recognized and valued the world over. We must put the culture first, because this sets the tone and creates a focus on building connection upon which Ireland's wider agenda can be pursued. The innovation, dynamism and differentiation that are so palpable in Ireland's culture are mirrored in the strategy for growing investment, industry and the economy. And then, to finish, re-engineering Ireland's marketing strategies and campaigns to show a deeper, more real sense of Ireland is absolutely vital and important. It's really important these days, and all of you know this, when authenticity is such a powerful motivator of people's choices and decisions, that we tell our story using a narrative that is authentic and credible, not led by marketeers, but using marketing insightfully to reflect a more accurate picture and sound of Ireland. The idea here is to use these uniquely significant opportunities to design a better approach that more accurately reflects the attractive complexity of Ireland, the advantages of doing business with Ireland, and the confidence to be Irish wherever in the world you are. Seamus Heaney once said, and I'm quoting him loosely here, because I think it was in a poem, but I remember him saying to me one day, he said, every day that you get up, you must stand up, and when you stand up, you look down at the ground to know that nothing is beneath you. And then you look up at the sky and work out that nothing is beyond you. And between those two places, you find the motive force to live day by day. I think we're at a very interesting point in Ireland where the coalition, the collision, the coming together of creativity in arts and business can coagulate together in a way that will make us an integrated, fully functioning, fully realizable society at this particular time in our history.
So I'm also there will be a microphone working in the room, so if there's any leaders amongst the corporate or cultural communities that think they have some items to add to this conversation, please consider what you'd like to say. As that microphone, I think, Susan, you have one. That's all right. Ruth, when I know you're going to talk a little bit later on about many of the intellectual property issues that face the film and entire creative industries. As we move into a new era where this is becoming increasingly important for all types of creatives, what are the key things that new leaders in Ireland can have in their minds as they develop their careers?
Creatives' careers?
Yeah.
Well, if you saw the video, that's a video from the organization that I run now. It's called CreativeFuture. And as Philip said, creativity is the cultural fabric of our planet.
Yeah.
We have been storytellers since the beginning of time, right? Cave dwellings, cave drawings. And I don't know that anything is different. I mean, to me, the true, kind of the true beyond is the intersection of art and commerce, right? I mean, what's better than being able to tell extraordinary stories, be they through film or television or music or books? They fuel inspiration, and they are commerce for us. I mean, people, it's interesting, especially in America, you're supposed to be a doctor or a lawyer or a scientist. It's always looked down that you should be someone in the creative industries. And that's what fuels our life and our imaginations. And I think that any young person going into the creative industries, be whatever that might be, should never forget that it is as important to our society as any business venture that they would do. That's, for me, for kids not to forget, to keep their eye on the prize.
And Sharon, in your case, technology is such a growing industry in Ireland, and new companies are emerging all the time, and the blur between creativity and business is there. It's very apparent that these are creative people. What are the things that you recommend people exploring or developing their ideas now?
So I would say a couple of things, and to add to your point in regard to our teenagers and our children and their education, the desire to recruit talented, creative individuals in the technology industry has never been, more key than it is today. So we actively seek out and help to transform from a career perspective and embrace those attributes that in prior generations we may have looked for accountants or lawyers, etc. And unfortunately, I did that
no
finance.
offense to lawyers.
I know, and I did a finance background. I should clarify myself in advance.
No offense.
But we're very much looking for those creative skill sets, and we truly embrace them. That's the first thing I wanted to say. And second thing, just to talk about culture, because that has come out a lot. Both the connection with the, I suppose, the technology companies and their culture, and the attributes, especially companies like LinkedIn and other companies in the internet and technology industry want to embrace very much around. In LinkedIn, we talk about it in the context of transformation of self, company, and the world, and very much looking at not just the company, but the world, and in the case of Philip's earlier comment, looking to that sky, but very much stabilized by the ground that we stand on. So I think it's very much around embracing creatives in the commercial attributes, and secondly about embracing the culture, not only Ireland's innate culture, but where that very much juxtaposes with what is in this room, US multinationals in Ireland. And I think that junction has never been stronger, and is really creating what I see today as an amazing startup community, an Irish Indigenous startup community, and spin-offs that I don't think we had seen in prior generations, but I see really alive today, and Ireland being a hotbed for that innovation.
I know that there's one question in the audience, and please raise your hand if you do have a question. There's a person with the microphone just there. Please go ahead.
Philip, I'd just like to say thank you for your insight and the way your creative mind expressed and touched over so many aspects of life. I work now in the area of politics and public representation. I think we need much more creative minds to shape our society, to understand the intergenerational responsibilities and contributions to society, and not just to be taking it at a one-dimensional view of commerce and quantities and measurements and GDP, but actually the texture of what happens in the lives of the people that are the Irish people. As you said, that 10 million citizens of the United Kingdom that could be citizens of Ireland.
That's right.
And the politics, I mean, our Taoiseach was there earlier on, and he talked as if he was a visitor looking through the window of commerce and culture, instead of saying, and we as politicians have a responsibility to use our minds creatively as to how to make the best decisions, the fairer decisions, how to execute and mind justice and things like that. That's a very deep and solemn responsibility. And sometimes, through the haste of commerce, we don't pause to think about that.
I think to work in a more integrated way is hugely important. I mean, I just watch the apparatus of the state, and there are silos, a department for here. If there is an integrated way of beginning to be able to work together in a new and interesting way, I think that's very important. That sense of belonging, Peter, I think is very, very important, that we have a sense that we belong, that we have grown up after 100 years, that we are, finally, emotionally adult in the way that we're going to go about our world. Because there are a number of questions, what will give us a sense of belonging in a world, and I just wrote this down, where what cannot be measured is not valued, where what cannot be predicted will not be risked, where what cannot be controlled will not be permitted, and where what cannot deliver a forecast outcome is not undertaken. I think we have to ask ourselves these questions, because I think we do sit now with some hope at the edge of a really, really good possibility for Ireland, and it would be terrible to squander that and for everybody to remain in their boxes, because we're talking about the same thing here, really, since the discussion began this morning, and since Dell designed the chip that came out here. They didn't manufacture it, they designed it. So we're talking about the natural resource of imagination, the gift of imagination. We stand up on our butter boxes as Irish people and say, we're great at this, we're great at that, we punch above our weight, we're going to do this, and the other thing. Well, let's go do it. It would be nice to go and do it. We definitely have the potential, we definitely have the smarts, we definitely have the imagination. And if the imagination is the raw material, we need to invest in that raw material. You know, the grass grows, the cows eat the grass, the milk happens. In my world of arts and culture and everything else, people will leverage the outcome for a dividend in tourism, for a dividend somewhere else, but they will not invest in the basic growing of that particular stuff, and it really is a shame. But I think things are changing, and I think I would be hopeful. And then that business of, you know, reaching out to this dispersed diaspora in the world. You know, Kingsley Aikens has written very, very detailed reports on, you know, what might be possible if we are able to gather to ourselves this diaspora and bring them back home and work in a global sense with them. So I'd be full of hope, really. Yeah.
I know there's just one question, and the last one, if that's okay, and then we're going to stop. There's just at the front here.
Okay, my name is Raymond Hegarty. I heard the words intellectual property being mentioned there.
Yes.
I'm an IP strategist, and one of the things that worries me about the signals we're sending out to the world, we recently announced the Knowledge Development Box in Ireland,
Yeah.
which sounded very exciting until the consultation was published, and it really seems to be a patent box rather than a knowledge development box, and a very restricted patent box. 25 years ago, I was working in Japan, and the only hooks that we had to explain to people who Ireland was U2. People remembered Bono climbing to the top of the scaffolding on the stage. They were talking about the Irish rugby team who'd been out there in the green jerseys. In more recent years, you had the annual concert, which is all Japanese pop stars, and Enya did a live performance from her castle here in Ireland. Right. Nobody's talking about biotech in Ireland, or nobody's talking about data centres, a fantastic data centre somewhere. That the hooks are cultural hooks. And we seem to forget it then when we go out and we start trying to persuade the world that we're better than the world in technology. We have to, and I know I should be beating the drum for patents because that's what I'm a specialist in, but we do have to get the hooks and the culture and the relevance of why Ireland is important and why there is a hook before we start trying to go out and trying to sell Ireland as a technical place as well.
Thank you. Trish, would you like to respond?
No, I absolutely agree with you, and I often wonder, I'm sometimes in the States and I'm asked, you know, why is Ireland the highest consumer of cinema per capita in Europe? And one of my answers is because film is a modern form of storytelling. And the only thing that's changed between telling stories at the far side and telling stories in the way that I help to do is that we've learned how to monetize it. But yet, I think you're right, that with the Irish, and you've touched on it to some degree, we sometimes seem a little embarrassed or a little ashamed that we're actually really good at culture, you know, and we're constantly trying to strive to prove that we can also, you know, be grown up about it, that we can monetize it. So we jump very quickly to put the emphasis on the harder elements, like, as you say, patents, biotech, etc. And I think that will be a pity if we lose that, because frankly, you know, without story, there's nothing.
Okay, thank you. I'm conscious that we're coming to the end of our panel discussion. Thank you to all my panelists for their contribution. A couple of things that I'd like to just recap on, which is common across the cultural and corporate communities, is that dreaming big is absolutely essential. And one thing I'll take away from today is, don't let your ideas suck. My ideas suck.
Do let your ideas
suck. Let your ideas suck. Yes, exactly.
That's the important bit.
That's the important thing. Sorry, it's slight mishap there. And another thing that I took away from this morning is that we're all in the business of fun, and Ireland is a fun country to come to. And every single person here is examples of how fun and the business of creating fun for people is something really unique about Ireland. And I'd like not to forget that and celebrate it.
Can I just say one last thing?
Yeah.
I've been reading Brené Brown recently, and she said two things. Vulnerability is the birthplace of creativity and innovation, and belonging is much more important than just fitting in.
Great place to
Okay.
finish.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a million, Andrew.
Thank you.
I hope that